Good afternoon, everyone. Some of us have just come from the White House, where the president really signed a monumental bill, the Honor Our Pact Act, for our veterans. It was legislation spearheaded in the House by Mr. Takano, chair of the Veterans Affairs Committee, and in keeping with our purpose, honor our oath to protect and defend, and again, to honor our veterans for their service. As we have said, in the battlefield, we leave no soldier behind, and when they come home, we leave no veteran behind. Protecting to defend is what our CODELs are always all about, defense. That's the purpose, the justification. We expand that to include economic issues as well as governance issues, security, economy, governance. To that end, we follow the lead of our president, who made clear that one of his priorities was a strong Asian Pacific initiative to increase our cooperation in those fields: security, economy, and governance. It was a remarkable trip in which I'm very proud to have traveled. We're like 6 co-chairs of the delegation because we all brought so much to it. But again, I'm very thrilled, almost emotional about what happened at the White House today. But actually, it's what this week has been about. The CHIPS bill is a national security bill that was signed yesterday. The PACT bill today, again, yesterday afternoon, the president signing the authorization for our support of Sweden and Finland coming into NATO, and then on Friday when we pass the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, again recognizing that strong economy is essential to a strong defense of our country. So again, we went to, as you know, Singapore, Malaysia, Taiwan, South Korea, the Republic of Korea, and to Japan. In all of the countries, we met with the leadership of the country, but important to us and central to it was our interparliamentary meetings to show that we see the role of Congress in strengthening the discussion. We went with humility, we went with respect to listen, to learn what their views were about what the president was proposing, and sharing with candor and respect how we saw things. It was very constructive in that way. We also had the privilege of being, well, here we are in some meetings. They're self-explanatory. That's the Prime Minister of Singapore, who welcomed us grandly. But we also paid respects to some of the cultural aspects of their country that they were so proud of in Singapore, in all of the countries. And perhaps we'll go into that. Again, 6 co-chairs, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Gregory Meeks, and you'll hear from him in a moment, Mark Takano, chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, Susan Delbene, the vice chair of the Ways and Means Committee, Raja Krishnamurthy, a member of the Intelligence Committee, and Andy Kim, who cannot be with us, child care. He was gone last week, child care issues. He has 2 little boys, and he is a former diplomat working in the State Department under President Obama, and a member of the Foreign Affairs as well as the Armed Services Committee. He sort of was our diplomat on the trip, would you say? And we miss him here, but he's available to answer any questions you may have. It is the beautiful diversity of our trip. Imagine this, the beautiful diversity of the trip, which is self-evident. But Mr. Takano, Japanese American, Mr. Krishnamurthy, born in India, Andy Kim's parents born in Korea. So the respect for culture, country, and differing views so eminent for all of us on the committee, but some of it directly connected in that way. The purpose, as I say, was to talk about defense, economy, and governance, and the members will talk about some of that. But in each of the countries, we thank them all for their immediate and strong response to condemn Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. To the president, especially those in South Asia, we thank them for their leadership and just banning Burma, as I call it, from participating in some of their meetings in reaction to their execution of 4 political leaders there and their oppression of political dialogue there. It was remarkable to see, but of course we talked about, in terms of governance, we talked about COVID, we talked about climate change, and the rest. So it was very valuable. In different countries we had specific issues that related to their countries, which we can talk about if you wish. In terms of Taiwan, our purpose in going to Taiwan was to say that we have this strong relationship built on the status quo, which we support, which is really important because they're saying, well, we're trying to upset. No, the Taiwan Relations Act of 1979, at the same time as our change of recognition, established the terms of our relationship, the 3 U.S.-China joint communiques, and the 6 assurances. So there's no departure from that. But in keeping with that, we will not allow China to isolate Taiwan. They have kept Taiwan from participating in the World Health Organization, other things where Taiwan can make a very valued contribution. And they may keep them from going there, but they're not keeping us from going to Taiwan. We will not allow them to. So we think that their reaction, that was our purpose, to salute this thriving democracy. Don't take it from me. Freedom House said one of the freest democracies in the world. Show our respect for that, for the success of their economy, for the enthusiasm of their young people to embrace democracy, and others as well, but the young knowing nothing else except a free Taiwan. So that was our purpose. Their pretext was our visit, for them to do what they normally do, intensified. They didn't do it when the Senate went under Chairman Menendez of the Foreign Relations Committee. They just decided to do it this time. So in any event, we're very proud of our delegation. We're very proud of our men and women in uniform. When I talk about security, whether it was at Travis Air Force Base, whether it was in Hawaii, where we visit with them and went to the Arizona, and then to Guam on our way to get their appraisal of the situation in the region, the Asian Pacific, and also to pay our respects to our men and women in uniform, which we did there, and we did in the countries that we visited, especially in Korea and in Japan. And in Korea, we had the privilege, led by the General Lakamura, to go to the DMZ to get an up-to-date current report of the North-South dynamic in Korea. It was interesting to me because I've been to Pyongyang, I've been to North Korea. It's a horrible place, but again, we were seeing where at the border how things were going. So for these and other reasons, we were very honored to be received. We thanked our host of the host countries. We spent a good deal of time in an interparliamentary way in every country with their speakers and that. And again, we thank our embassies and our diplomats who represent us so well and who made our visit such a success. Just close by saying 2 things. When we were in Japan, we were beautifully welcomed at the Diet. We went there to pay our respects to Prime Minister Abe, who was a friend of America, and they had their tribute. They'll have more, but this one they invited us to. It was very sad, but again, a connection between our 2 countries. And in closing, I just want to thank our president. He has been a president for peace, for security, for economic growth, for good governance, and we're very proud of his initiative, which was the main purpose of our visit and our timing. With that, I want to yield to our distinguished chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, that's the Senate, the Foreign Affairs Committee, and the place where so much of all of this begins, to praise him for his commitment to our security, our economic success, and good governance in all of the countries that we are engaged with. Mr. Chairman. Gregory Meeks of New York.
I want to thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to participate in this very important, very substantial, and very successful CODEL. It was important for us to be there in the region. The people of the region wanted to see us there. They understand that part of what is taking place in the world is, as we see from place after place, it's a question of democracy versus an autocratic government. And they want to know that we are partners. And that's why they welcomed us at every stop that we went to, saying thank you for being here, whether it was Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, Singapore, or Malaysia. In Taiwan, we saw people lined up down the streets, over 250,000 people watching our flight land. And then the crowds on the streets saying, thank you for coming. We had the opportunity to talk and to have conversation with various of our legislators, which was really important. And we had to then chat it back and forth on what we're doing. And I had the opportunity as chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee to let them know that we're doing many things, particularly in regards to Taiwan. We've got some bills that were coming out or that have passed already, like the Taiwan Peace and Stability Act. They were interested to know that, like the Taiwan Fellowship Act and the Taiwan Reassurance Act, and provisions supporting the name change of TACRO to the Taiwan Representative Office in the United States. Again, it is not us who want to change the status quo. We see that coming from Beijing. And they were so appreciative that we stood to show that we're going to partner with our friends and allies throughout the region. They all have issues, whether it's the South China Sea or the Taiwan Strait. But they want to know that we are there, and they want to see even our soft power. And that's why the conversations that you see with my fellow members, and they'll talk about whether it's working with our veterans or dealing with climate or dealing with what was historic with reference to chips and exchanges and dealing with manufacturing goods in the United States. I conclude just by saying that, and I thank President Biden also for being in the region. He's visited the region and done another thing. So we're in lockstep with our focus and our message to the people in Southeast Asia, that you have a friend, an ally, and a partner in the United States of America. And when you call to ask us to come to visit you, as we did on this trip, we'll be there with you. So with that, I just turn it over to the chair of the Veterans Affairs Committee, Chairman Mark Takano.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We kind of call each other Mr. Chairman all the time. When we first became chairman, we were just so thrilled in 2018. Mr. Chairman. So good afternoon. I am Mark Takano. I chair the Veterans Affairs Committee, and I was honored to attend this congressional delegation, be a part of the congressional delegation with Speaker Pelosi and our colleagues here today. And while we were abroad, there was interest with our defense security allies and partners. Some are allies and some are partners. Interesting enough, we visited all very, very robust, inspiring democracies. Some of those democracies have a quote-unquote balanced approach with China. They don't really want the United States to force them to choose sides. But interesting enough, even those that don't want to be forced to choose sides are very, very, very interested in the United States being their security partner. We help them with military armaments and training and training together. And of course, they were interested in what we do with our veterans. I had a long, extensive talk with the defense minister of Malaysia on that topic. I had a chance to speak with, for a second time, with the Minister for Veterans and Patriots of South Korea. We're very interested in moving forward more work on the Korean Valor Act, which was included in the recently passed fiscal 23 NDAA. The Valor Act was passed there, and it has to, I don't want to get into the details yet, but it has to do with naturalized Korean American veterans from the Vietnam War era and how we can serve them better here in the States. We had a chance to, wherever we could, bring up the issue of human rights, but also I believe that the health of any, when we visit all democracies, that the health of any democracy is measured by how well it protects its vulnerable minorities, in contrast to the authoritarian countries that Mr. Meeks mentioned. And so we raised the issue of how well are your vulnerable minorities being treated, as well, including LGBTQ people. So we raised that in countries where that topic is not necessarily one that's very comfortable. But interesting enough, I think there was actually a willingness to talk and a willingness to discuss those things. Just last night, as an after effect of this CODEL, I was on a virtual discussion, a virtual interparliamentary discussion with Japanese and Korean parliamentarians from the South Korean Assembly and leaders of the Japanese Diet. Amazing. The impact of this trip was very evident. Huge openness to moving forward the trilateral alliance among Japan, the United States, and Korea. So very, very important with regard to the Taiwan Straits issue, and having our countries work more closely together. One of the things that came out of that discussion last night is all of us are calling upon our heads of state to get a summit of the three nations to happen. And that's one of the things that I think is an after effect of this trip, is that there's this huge openness that I see. And while it's not direct, I'm not talking about Taiwan so much, but really this trilateral alliance is really so important in terms of our being able to provide a space for Taiwan, to exist in the status quo. We're looking to, and it's China's who has challenged the status quo. With that, I want to turn it over to Suzanne Delbene, the Vice Chair of the Ways and Means Committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll use your word, Chairman Nattano. I'm Susan Delbene, Vice Chair of the Ways and Means Committee from the great state of Washington. And Chairman Meeks wanted me to point out that the Mariners beat the Yankees last night. It was really an honor to be part of this journey with Speaker Pelosi and our entire delegation. And while it was the first time I visited, I think, every country since I've been a member of Congress, I have visited the region many times in my former career in business and technology, and I know firsthand the very close partnership that we have, the economic partnership that we have in innovation, and the long-term partnerships that's been there that we can build on. In fact, over half of all global economic growth is expected in this region over the next 30 years. So it was a primary goal of our delegation, and the speaker talks about security, economy, and governance. On economy, important goal of our delegation was to talk about how we build stronger economic ties throughout the region. Increasing our economic presence is clearly key to advancing other goals that we have in terms of boosting security and strengthening democracy. So we should be strengthening partnerships and throughout the region with like-minded countries, and we should also be building on the partnerships we have. I think it's very, very important that we are collectively rule makers in the region, not rule takers. This is especially true when it comes to areas where we don't have strong international norms and standards, such as the rules that govern our digital economy or consumer rights in the digital economy. In our meetings, we discussed the opportunities of the new economic initiatives like the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework or the U.S.-Taiwan Initiative for 21st Century Trade, and how we can continue to build on those partnerships to address and strengthen supply chains so our economy, our collective economies are more resilient in the face of a pandemic, wars, or other future shocks. And we also discussed the CHIPS and Science Act that President Biden signed into law yesterday. Another key piece of legislation to strengthen our supply chains and create the resiliency and redundancy that's so important, and obviously to make sure we have increased manufacturing capacity right here in the United States. And it's critical. We talked about, semiconductors are in everything, not just things that we think of traditional technology from, cell phones or computers, but washing machines to ultrasound equipment to trucks and airplanes. The bill also boosts federal investments in research and innovation so that we can continue to lead the way in years to come. And that's an opportunity that we can do throughout Asia also. Our overarching goal is to work together towards shared prosperity, and the speaker talked about shared prosperity a lot on our trip, and how we can use our innovative capabilities to solve new problems, like to address climate change, to advance energy security, to bring down inflation, and to promote equality. So it was a rich conversation, important conversation, one that we will continue moving forward in conjunction with the administration, with Secretary Raimondo and Ambassador Tai to continue to build our partnership there. So I want to now introduce a member of the House Intelligence Committee, a proud representative from Chicago. I think everyone we met knows that Raja Krishnamurthy is from Chicago. So let me turn it over to Congressman Krishnamurthy.
That's pretty cool.
So as a Cubs fan, we're not going to talk about baseball today, sadly. But in any case, thank you so much, Speaker Pelosi, for including me on this particular trip. Thank you to all of you for paying attention to this congressional delegation trip. Our presence in these various countries was welcome because the United States ultimately is incredibly important for the security of the region. And everywhere we went, as Chairman Takano and others mentioned, the leaders that we met with all said we want to strengthen our ties from a security standpoint with the United States, and we want to make sure that you are present in the Southeast Asian region for a long time to come. So to that end, perhaps some of you noticed our visit to Taiwan. We support peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. We also believe that nobody, through unilateral effort or the use of force, should change the status quo. And especially in light of what's happened in Ukraine, we want to make sure that what happened in Ukraine does not happen with regard to the Southeast Asian region and specifically Taiwan. Unfortunately, the People's Republic of China has engaged in rather provocative measures and live fire exercises, which happened long before we went to Taiwan and then happened after we went to Taiwan. If the cost of avoiding these types of provocative measures is to cede control of Taiwan to the People's Republic of China, or to cede control of our travel schedules in Congress to the People's Republic of China, that is not a price we are going to pay. That being said, we seek increased economic cooperation in the region. As Vice Chair Del Bene mentioned, we did talk about the CHIPS Act, and in that regard, Taiwan has pledged to invest $20 billion in manufacturing semiconductor chips in the United States. This week, on Friday, we're going to pass through the House a historic Inflation Reduction Act and the largest investment in fighting climate change in our history. We respectfully submit that area of climate change could be a fruitful area of collaboration with the People's Republic of China. Ultimately, we believe that these provocative measures taken by the PRC were an unfortunate attempt to deflect attention from some real problems that are happening within the PRC with regard to their economy and their response to COVID-19. However, we respectfully submit that these provocative measures are going to continue to harm their economy, not enhance it, because it will increase uncertainty for commerce in the region. And as Taiwan's economy and the rest of the region is so intertwined, any further provocative measures will only hurt the Chinese economy. That being said, I'm glad to see that these live fire exercises appear to be easing and these provocative measures appear to be subsiding. And so we look forward to a time of collaboration as opposed to increased tensions going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my colleagues. Thank you very much, Cubs fans, Mariner fans, Yankee fans. What are you?
What am I?
Yeah.
Putting you on the spot.
Be
Dodgers,
diplomat-
Angels, I'm whoever's
Giants and Orioles. But in any event, as you may know, baseball is a big sport in Japan. And we did spend a good deal of time with the Japanese members of parliament bragging about their exports to the United States in that regard. And the cultural aspects of our visit were very unifying, shall we say. When we were in Korea, they said, we understand you like U2 and Bono's music, so they had these beautiful performers come in playing on YouTube songs on Korean instruments. We have pictures, you see them there. And then they ended up with Frank Sinatra. And then my way, yeah. And then in Singapore, what we saw there was quite remarkable. They park by the bay, the big giant tree, and all the rest of that. But they take great pride in their cultures, and we wanted to pay our respects. One thing I do want to point out: when you see all those empty seats, that's the Diet. You saw those empty seats in that one film. If you looked up. There's where we're being welcomed in Malaysia, but that's in Japan. But in the Diet, we see all those empty seats. They ring the bell, and those seats are filled in a minute, in a second. And we just, it's like people popped up.
15 minutes, that's for sure.
They did. And, in any event, for these and other reasons, and I wanted you, this is the DMZ. This is Panmunjom, the border. That building in the back is North Korea. There's with the Prime Minister of Japan. We were very honored to be welcomed by him. They're talking baseball there, I guess. In any event, there it is. In a minute, 30 seconds to be filmed. My colleagues have heard me say this again and again. When I was a student, I was at the inauguration of John F. Kennedy, before any of you were born, and perhaps even before your parents were born. But in any event, everybody made a big fuss, and students learn all over the world, and certainly in our country, what the president said to citizens of America: ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. You all learned that in school, right? Shake your head, yes. In any event, the next line is what I remembered and struck me. He said, citizens of the world, ask not what America can do for you, but what we can do working together for the freedom of mankind. And that's what this trip was about, and that's what President Biden is about, working together. No condescension, but consensus building. And that really was our spirit that we brought to this. How can we work together, listening to your priorities, sharing ours with you, finding our common ground, appreciating our shared values? So in that regard, it was inspiring. We come back informed, inspired, and again, ready to work. And one point that has to be made about this: when China does what it does in the Taiwan Straits or in the South China Sea, it has an impact on America's working families, because you cannot tie up the waterways. That just increases cost. And if you add, you just saw a picture of somebody with a selfie. That was a dissident from Tiananmen Square, where Kashi, and I met him when he was 21 years old, when he came right out of Tiananmen Square while people were being crushed under the tanks. And he also happens to be a Uyghur, and Mr. Chairman has been a leader in fighting to show highlight what's happening in the genocide in China in terms of the Uyghurs. But anyway, for many reasons, it was a very unifying trip. That's in Korea, too. Those people were killed by the North Koreans. In any event, we're pleased to take any questions you may have. Yes, ma'am. No, we aren't?
They're awake.
Safe and sound. Welcome back.
Thank you.
There are some reports that your son was on this trip with you.
Yes, he was.
And
Yes, he
what
was.
was his role?
His role was to be my escort. Usually, we invited spouses. Not all could come. That I had him come, and I was very proud that he was there, and I'm thrilled, and it was nice for me.
Did he have any business dealings?
No, he did not. Of course, he did not. Next question. Yes, ma'am.
Madam Speaker, so China announced that its military drills around Taiwan are over today. So would you expect China to kind of stop its saber-rattling over Taiwan for a while, or do you expect it to use your visit as a pretext and potentially the drills as a game plan to speed up its timeline of invading Taiwan?
Well, I think what we saw with China was they were trying to establish sort of a new normal. And we just can't let that happen. Mr. Chairman, do you want to respond to that in terms of, we don't know what the Chinese plan, but we know that they were trying to push their way closer to whatever thoughts they have about the future.
Yeah, so look, clearly China had their plans before we took our trip. And what they want to do is to try to deter us from going to visit our friend and ally. And I think what this trip did, which they did not expect, is show that no matter what President Xi says, we are going to stand by our friends and allies. So I think that China now has to take a different viewpoint on it because we are unequivocal on what our positions will be with reference to our friends and our allies. The president visiting when he did and talking about being involved in the region, and now the House of Representatives, led by the Speaker of the House, gave Xi a message that he's not going to dictate to us on what we do and what we don't do. And so I would hope that he now understands he should talk to us on those things that we can work with, as indicated by my colleagues, and with climate, because that's really important to us, and keeping the status quo. Nobody wants to change anything. And so I hope their calculus has changed as they now pull back from the tests and the training period that they've done over the last few days.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. So one thing the Taiwanese envoy here has been very vocal about is a multi-billion-dollar backlog of foreign military sales to Taiwan in terms of delivery. I understand this also might be an issue with Japan and South Korea. So in your travels, was this addressed with our allies and partners, and what is being done to address that backlog?
Who would like to
Sure.
respond to that? Or I can.
Yes, that was discussed. This is an ongoing issue, and as you know, given the various needs that we're trying to supply with regard to Ukraine, there's increased stress on the supply chain within the defense industrial base. That being said, I can't go into details, but we are taking steps with regard to this particular issue, and we intend to fulfill all of our obligations to all of our partners and others who are counting on us for these vital supplies.
And I could just tell you that on the Foreign Affairs Committee, we're working on bills now to help expedite and to reduce red tape to get defense items that are needed out in a quicker fashion. So we're looking at that right now. We may come and have some hearings on it, but we're looking at ways so that we can expedite it on the committee as we speak.
Yes, sir.
Given the comments from the president a few weeks ago saying that the military thought it was not a good idea for you guys to go to Taiwan right now, is this administration being too cautious when it comes to the issue of Taiwan?
It was we really do not address any questions about our travels before a trip. And so in keeping with that, I won't comment on the comment that the president made before our trip. But all I can say is that we are very proud of our military. Their preparation and their actually, I think, minimize the impact of the Chinese on our trip. So they took very good care of us. I don't remember them ever telling us not to go, the military.
No. And the other thing they did say that our soft power in the region is tremendously important to go along and complement what they're doing in the region and how we need to work collectively, because the people want to know what we're doing and how we're invested in them. So they really welcomed, from our dialogue, like us being there and talking about soft power and how we can engage in the region in that manner also.
One more, yes, sir.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Do you think the Department of Justice or the FBI should come forward and offer some kind of either explanation or at least context for the raid at Mar-a-Lago or something they may not typically do, but given the unprecedented...
I think we made it really clear that this meeting was about this Codell. I'll be having another press conference the next day or so about legislation and about whatever else is going on, with all due respect to your question. On this subject...
I know security was important on this trip, but in terms of security here at home, since this action was taken against...
I'm sorry, it's hard to hear you.
I said I know security was important on your trip,
Yeah.
But just in terms of security here at home, just in light of the action at the former president's home, is there any concern right now among you or members about your own security, given some of the chatter, this talk about civil war? Some say it's on par with January 6th.
Well, with all due respect, I place your category in the same, your question in that same category, but we did have a briefing that was long planned before any of the actions of this week, was long planned for security for members, all members of Congress. On this subject?
Yes, Madam Speaker. What was your reaction to China's sanctions against you and your immediate family members?
There's no reaction. Who cares? I mean, right? Look, I want to tell you something. Let's enlarge the issue. We're talking about, as our chairman, distinguished chairman, and others have mentioned, the struggle between democracy and autocracy. Autocracy is not a peaceful place. So again, whether it's the South China Sea, the Straits of Taiwan, whatever's happening in Tibet, in the Uyghur regions, Hong Kong, and the rest. We didn't go there to talk about China. We went there to praise Taiwan. We went there to show our friendship, to say China cannot isolate Taiwan. So that's what it was about. That is incidental to me, of no relevance whatsoever. But again, we'll be together perhaps tomorrow or the next day to talk about other subjects. But for now, again, I want to thank my colleagues. They just were so fabulous on this trip because they brought knowledge, they brought values, they brought strategic thinking, they brought respect for the people that we met. And may I just say that while we praised our troops and General Kamara, who took us around, they were fabulous. As you see, every place we could, showcase them, praise them, and the rest. But on the diplomatic side, we were beautifully represented. Ambassador Kaplan, Ambassador McVetter, Ambassador Goldberg, Ambassador Emmanuel. I was leading up to him, and our former colleague, Emmanuel, and then our representative, Al Kirk, in Taiwan. We praise them for their diplomacy, which is very much the soft power that is important to our security as well. We just close by once again saluting our president for what he has done in our North Atlantic relations, which are so important, as well as his initiative with the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. Thank you all so much. Thank you.